Hi, this is attorney Nicole Christie from the Christie Law Firm, where we work hard to make families stronger. And so today I want to talk to you about acronyms. We started this series about what are those different terms that DCF is using. You hear a bunch of letters and you're thinking, what does that all mean? So I want to take time to highlight some of those major acronyms that you might hear. And I'll also have a link down below to DCF's website where they have a long list of acronyms, just so that you are familiar and that you can find yourself more educated about the terms that they're using. I want you to know that I don't think that it's necessarily a means by which they're trying to confuse anyone, but because they do this work day in and day out and they use the same type of words and the same type of acronyms, it almost becomes a second language. But one of the things that we do as a firm is whenever we're talking with DCF, especially with the client present, we make them stop and ask and say, what does that acronym mean? What does that service that you're using and referring to by just letters, what does that mean? And what that allows the DCF to do is slow down and provide explanation. And the more explanation you can get out of DCF, the better. So today I want to talk to you about court acronyms. Those are the acronyms you might hear at court. And so especially with court being on what we call a short calendar most of the time, they only have 15 minutes. You're only there for at most, 5 to 15 minutes. And so you'll hear a lot of words and you're thinking, what does that all mean? And so I want to take time to explain what all of those terms mean, and hopefully you'll walk away with a better understanding. And so when DCF first removes a child, if they don't go through court, they do what they call a 96-hour hold. And what that is a temporary hold on a child in which DCF has those 96 hours to go get what they call an OTC. OTC stands for Orders of Temporary Custody. And those orders of temporary custody are just that, temporary. It's not meant to be long term, but they have to file for orders of temporary custody. And so when that happens, and we do have an entire series about the court process, so I won't repeat that here, but when they file that, they also file neglect petitions. And so when you get to court on that first day for your order of temporary custody preliminary hearing, where they just need to hear about that, you'll hear different acronyms for the different types of people that are there. So there's the one individual who represents DCF, and they are the AAG, the Assistant Attorney General. They represent DCF in court. And so you will have the social worker, the SW, which we talked about in another video, and you'll also have the AMC, sometimes referred to as the attorney for the minor child or the attorney for the child. But if you see the acronym AMC, that's what that stands for. And so in that particular setting, they'll have the attorney for the dad, attorney for mom, the AMC, attorney for the minor child, the AAG, Assistant Attorney General, as well as the judge. The judge never has an acronym. That's just their full name. Their full last name is what's used. And so they decide, what are the next steps, along with you as the client talking to your attorney as to what the next steps are. And so they may set it down for what they call a P&D. That means if everybody's in agreement, there's a plea and disposition. Plea meaning that there's a notation, there is a decision made about whether or not the child has been abused or neglected. And then the disposition, what is the court going to do about the fact that the child has been found to be abused or neglected? And there's more definitions to that, and we do have some other videos to explain those. But again, if you see the words P and D, that's what it stands for, plea and disposition. Now, over the course of the case, and especially at that very first court date, you're going to get a PP hearing or a permanency plan hearing. Sometimes, again, you'll see just these initials, or they might use the dates perm plan date. And that process is not necessarily the date that the children should come back home. So while you're in court, you may hear at that first court date a date called the perm plan date. It's the permanency plan date. And that is the date that if the child is still in DCF's care, it's not a guaranteed date that the child still is in care, but if the child or children are still in DCF's care, DCF is obligated to provide the court a report as to what they're going to do about that child still being in care. Years and years ago, kids would go into care and they would sometimes just be forgotten about because the caseloads were too high, there was a concern, and they just couldn't get to it, and kids would just age out of care. That's no longer the case. DCF has an obligation for every child in their custody to provide a permanency plan date and work towards a permanency for that child, whatever it might be, returning home, adoption, transfer of guardianship, or even staying in care depending on the age and nature of the issues regarding that child. So pay attention to those dates, because if there's no progress towards reunification and that perm plan date, the permanency planning date, comes up, then it could be that DCF is looking for another plan other than reunification. While your case is pending, there will be different types of meetings that you may come across. And so in the court, you might have what they call ICRs, in-court reviews. That's where basically exactly what it is, where the court reviews the progress of the case. You come into court normally by video, depending where you are, and you hear what's happening in the case. And so the judge gets a status and then makes a decision at the next one. There's also a CSC, which is a case status conference. Those conferences are where the attorneys, for the most part, along with the AAG, Assistant Attorney General, and the CSO, see all these initials? That is the Court Services Officer, where they support officer comes in and they talk about the case and decide, and we all decide, are we going to trial, or do we have an agreement, or what are some of the issues that are going to keep us from having an agreement, or what are some of the issues that make us have to go to trial. And so those are acronyms that you might hear at court or regarding court. But with your case, if your children have been removed, you'll hear about different meetings and different things that might come up. And so one of those meetings are called an ACR, Administrative Case Review. Now that's different from a actual hearing in court, and that is just where DCF every 6 months has to review a case plan. They type up a case plan, it has details, it gives an assessment. Those meetings are very important to go to. So when you see ACR, be sure to go to those. You might see initials that say CIP associated with the Administrative Case Review. CIP stands for Child in Placement or Children in Placement. And they have a whole separate plan, because again, DCF has obligations to that child when they take them into custody, not only regarding permanency, but making sure their schooling is on par, that their medical is on par, mental health issues. They're supposed to take care of that child like you would have if that child was home, if not better, because they have taken that child from your care. And so you'll see those initials be associated with that particular meeting. Sometimes they will have a child and family meeting, team meeting, and that's really to talk about, or a permanency plan meeting, to talk about where are we with the child, where are we with the case, where are we with permanency. Anytime DCF calls a meeting about your case, you should go to it. You should go ready to listen, ready to participate. I always encourage people not to argue with DCF, because they are good at it and they will use any argument you use against them against you. So it's good to listen and say things like, I understand, whether you agree or not, just so that you can get some feedback and know where you are with your case. As the case continues to progress, if you hear the words TFT, that's therapeutic family time, those are supervised visits. And they're normally a precursor to another service, which is the favorite words I love to hear, favorite initials, RTFT, which is Reunification Therapeutic Family Time. Now that service, when you hear DCF is ready to refer you to RTFT, that is such good news, because that means that they think you're closer to reunification, and now they want this service to come in to be able to assess whether or not, when it should happen and under what conditions. So those initials are very, very important. And again, as we talked about in another video around, the different types of services that can come in, always pay attention to that. If you have any questions, know what those initials mean. Another very important initial that you need to be aware of is when DCF files what they call a TPR, a termination of parental rights petition. that means that they're looking to sever your tie through the court with your child and free that child up for adoption. You never want to have to hear those words over the course of your representation or the course of your case with DCF, but know that when DCF starts to use those terms, what they're indicating to you is that they don't think reunification is going to be possible in a time frame that's sensitive to the child's needs. And again, the courts cannot allow a child to be in DCF's care indefinitely. There has to be a permanent plan. And so it's very important to keep that in mind, that the kids have to come home. And in a separate video, I'll talk about those time frames, or I have. We believe that if a kid isn't been removed, they need to go home within the first 6 to 9 months, because after that, it gets really, really difficult. So if you hear these different acronyms, hopefully they can trigger for you, to maybe look this up, maybe to ask more questions. But these are key acronyms that you might hear throughout the pendency of your case, and pay attention to them, because again, the more you know, the stronger it is for you to be able to defend against whatever DCF might be saying about you and your family. So until next time, thank you.